Blood Brothers, Red Rain Book, one of the Daywalker and the Bat prologue, The Math of Monsters. There is a math to hunting monsters, and Blade has been doing it in his head since he was old enough to sharpen a stake. It goes like this. Every vampire you leave alive costs the world between 4 and 11 human lives per year. Old ones cost more. Smart ones cost more. Ones with resources, infrastructure, a city that trusts them, those are the ones you drop everything for, because they're math compounds. He has crossed the country for less. He has crossed oceans for less. He has never crossed a universe. The rift had opened 3 weeks ago in a Detroit warehouse where a familiar of the Ashen Court had been running blood down out of Ontario. The familiar died badly. The thing behind him, a hollow-eyed thin man who smelled like grave dirt and ozone, died worse, but not before he talked. Not before he said the word that made the room go still. Dracula. Not Blade's Dracula. Not Drake. Not the deep one sleeping in the desert. A different Dracula. Another world's. Dead, the thin man swore. Burned to nothing years ago in a city called Gotham. Staked by a bat-shaped shadow that the vampire underworld of that world still would not name after dark. But the court didn't believe in dead Draculas. The court believed Dracula was an idea that reincarnated like weather, and they had learned to open doors between worlds, and they were sending pilgrims through to dig in the ashes of Gotham for anything left. A tooth, a rib, a drop of dried king's blood in the mortar of a church. Blade's math on that was very simple. You do not let anyone dig up a Dracula. Any Dracula. Anywhere. So he took the thin man's door. He walked through a wound in the air with a sword on his back and a bag of tricks on his hip, and 30 seconds of vertigo like being turned inside out through his own teeth, and he came out the other side onto a rooftop in a city that smelled like rain, rust, and old fear. Gotham. The sky in the east had gone the color of a fresh burn, dawn maybe 10 minutes out. Below him gargoyles, around him Gothic towers stacked like tombstones for giants. And 40 feet away, on the ledge of the cathedral roof, facing the coming sun with his cape hanging dead and heavy off shoulders that looked carved from basalt, a vampire. Blade knew it before he saw the face. He knew it the way you know a wolf is in the tree line. The stillness was wrong. No breath fogging the cold air, no shift of weight, no living fidget. Just a figure standing in the exact place where the sunrise would arrive first, positioned with the precision of a man who had calculated the angle of the light. Blade had seen that stance before, twice in 30 years. Old vampires, ones with enough of a soul left to be tired of what the hunger made them do, standing in the path of the sun like a man standing on train tracks. He had let them burn both times. Their math had checked out. The world was better with them gone. He put his hand on his sword and started forward to watch this one burn too. And then the figure turned its head, just slightly, hearing him from 40 feet in a wind that should have swallowed the sound, and Blade saw the profile against the burning sky. The ears, the cowl, the bat. Well, Blade thought, going very still, there's the shadow they wouldn't name. And the math in his head, the cold, reliable 30-year math, did something it had never done before. It hesitated. Chapter 1. 10 minutes to sunrise, Bruce. The sun is coming and I am not afraid of it, and that is how I know it's time. Fear is the tool. Fear is the whole architecture. I built a symbol out of fear because fear was the one honest thing Gotham and I had in common, and now I stand here and I search myself for it, for one flicker of the animal terror that should be screaming at a creature like me to get underground, and there is nothing. The hunger burned it out. The hunger burned everything out. It is the only tenant left in this body, and it does not fear the sun. It fears only an empty vein. Selina is dead. Gordon knows what I am and looks at me the way I taught this city to look at criminals. Alfred, no, not that, not even now. Some doors stay shut or the whole structure comes down. I killed Dracula. I tell myself that math every night the way other men pray. The Count is ash, his brood is ash. Gotham's children sleep without knowing how close it came. It was worth it. It had to be worth it. But the ledger has 2 columns, and in the other one, I drink. I have drunk. I choose the dying and the guilty. I choose the Penguin's gunman, and the men who traffic children out of the Bowery. I tell myself I am a scalpel, and every night the hunger asks for a little more, and my definitions get a little wider. And I've run this projection forward the way I run every projection forward, and I know exactly where the line crosses zero. I know the night I take someone innocent, I can almost see their face. I will not be here for that night. This isn't despair. I need that on the record, in whatever record is left of me. Despair is surrender, and I have never surrendered to anything. This is the last protocol. The contingency I wrote for every member of the League I wrote for myself first. If the asset becomes the threat, the asset is removed. I am the asset. I have become the threat. The math is clean. The light is 8 minutes out. The cloud bank over Tricorner will hold it back another 90 seconds after that. I have accounted for everything. I always account for everything. Which is why the voice, when it came, was the first thing in 2 years to genuinely surprise him. Move off that ledge, and I'll consider not treating you like every other bloodsucker I've met. Bruce turned. The man stood on the cathedral roof like he'd grown out of it. Black leather, black armor with a sheen of red at the seams like arterial light. A sword hilt over one shoulder. Dark glasses at 5 in the morning. He was broad and still in a way that Bruce's threat assessment reflexes, dulled by hunger but never gone, read instantly and unhappily. Military economy of motion, weight forward, hands loose. Killer. Experienced, not human. That last part arrived through senses Bruce hated owning. The man's heart was beating, slow, strong, 6160, and his blood moved with the sound of a deep river, and it smelled... God. It smells like wrong. It smelled wrong and right, both at once. Human blood sang one note to the hunger, a high, sweet dial tone that never stopped. This man's blood was a chord. There was daylight in it somehow. There was something in it the hunger recoiled from and craved simultaneously, and the craving was worse because it was new, and Bruce had spent 2 years building walls against the old cravings and had nothing built against this. His fangs ached down before he could stop them. 2 years of discipline and his own body betrayed him in a half-second, in front of a witness, at the end. Leave, Bruce said. The voice came out in the register the hunger had given him. Subterranean, wrong. Whatever you are, this doesn't concern you. See, that's the thing. The man walked forward, unhurried, boots silent on frost-slicked slate. I came through a hole in the world to make sure a dead king stays dead. Find out his grave's in this city, and the first thing I see when I step through is the guy who made the grave, about to make himself a sunrise. He stopped 15 feet away, close enough that his blood was a physical pressure against Bruce's teeth. So yeah, it concerns me. You're the only man in this universe who's killed a Dracula. That makes you an intelligence asset. Assets don't burn on my watch. You have 4 minutes to get off this roof. I've got all the time in the world, detective. The dark glasses caught the reddening sky. Sun doesn't bother me. And Bruce understood, the cord in the blood, the daylight note, the impossible warm heartbeat in an inhuman frame. And something he had believed extinct in himself lifted its head. Curiosity. Daywalker, Bruce said quietly. You're a myth, says the vampire dressed as a bat. The man's mouth moved, not quite a smile. Name's Blade. Blade, look at him. I've stood in rooms with master vampires, Nosferatu older than the language I curse in. I've felt what 4 centuries of hunger does to a thing's eyes, how it hollows them into wells you don't look into twice. This one's been turned, 2 years? 3? And his eyes are worse, not hollower, fuller. Every kill he's made is still in there, filed, weighed, itemized. Most vampires kill and forget. This one kills and remembers, and the remembering is eating him faster than the hunger is. And the hunger, Christ, I can see it from here. He's rationing himself. Cheeks gone to blade edges under that cowl, skin like paper over granite, hands trembling in a rhythm I know. That's not cold, that's not fear, that's a vampire, at least 8-9 days out from a real feed. Which should be impossible, because at 9 days they don't stand on rooftops having conversations. At 9 days they're animals. I've put down animals at 9 days. They don't talk. They don't choose, he's choosing. Right now, this second, with my blood 15 feet from his teeth, and yeah, I know what my blood does to them. I've used it as bait my whole life. He is standing in a hurricane and choosing not to move. I came here to confirm a corpse. Dracula's, and if the intel went bad, this one's. The math says a vampire Batman is a catastrophe deferred. Everything they whispered about him on the other side, the ashes of the Count, the massacre of the Brood, a whole nest wiped out in one night by one creature, says the math is right. He is the most dangerous vampire I have ever stood in front of, and he's standing in front of me starving, which means he's the most dangerous vampire I've ever stood in front of operating at maybe 40%. Let him step into the sun. Problem solves itself. Cleanest kill of my career, I don't even draw. So why is my hand off my sword? Because in 30 years I have never once seen the thing I'm looking at right now. A vampire losing to the hunger, and fighting anyway, not for blood, not for territory. Fighting his own venom to a standstill out of nothing but principle, with no one watching, at the literal end of his rope, planning to die specifically so he never breaks. I've spent my whole life being told the hunger always wins. I built myself on that. Every kill justified by that. The thirst is the truth of them and everything else is costume. If this man walks into that sunrise, I'll never know if that's actually true. Here's what's about to happen, Blade said. You're going to step back from that ledge. No, wasn't a request. Blade rolled his shoulders, and the sword whispered as it left its sheath. Titanium, acid-etched, the edge catching the pre-dawn like a strip of frozen lightning. You want to die, fine, everybody dies, but you don't get the sunrise. Sunrise is peaceful, sunrise is for men who finished their work. He leveled the blade at the bat on Bruce's chest. Your work isn't finished. There's a hole between worlds with your city on the other end of it. There's a cult digging for your Dracula's ashes, and you're the only one who knows where the body's buried, literally. So no, you don't get to check out. Not today. The vampire's stillness changed quality. Blade felt it like a pressure drop before a storm, the predator surfacing under the man. You think you can stop me? I think, Blade said, that you've got maybe 3 minutes of dark left. You're 9 days starved, and I do this for a living. But mostly, he shifted his grip. I think you won't fight me. Because fighting me means maybe biting me, and biting me means feeding. And feeding is the one thing you'd rather die than do. You've boxed yourself, detective. Your own code's got you in a corner. He let that land. Watched it land. Watched the tremble in the gauntleted hands stop, sheer will unbelievable, as the vampire absorbed the reed like a body blow. So here's my offer, one time only. Blade lowered the sword 6 inches, an opening a fighter of this caliber would recognize as deliberate, as respect. 5 days. You give me 5 days. You show me what you are when the hunger's at full scream. Every hour, no rationing, no relief. I watch, I test, I judge, and if you're what I think you might be, what I've never seen in 30 years of this, then I give you a way out of the corner, a permanent one. Daylight, control, the hunger on a leash for good. And if I fail your test? Blade smiled then, and there was nothing warm in it. Then I do what I came to this universe ready to do, and unlike the sun, I won't be peaceful about it. The wind moved between them. Below, Gotham groaned toward morning. Trucks, gulls, a siren 3 miles off. The east caught fire. Come on, Blade thought, and was surprised by how much he meant it. Come on, detective, bet on yourself one more time. The vampire looked at the horizon for a long moment, at the light coming to end him, mercy and verdict in one. Then Batman stepped back off the ledge, into the shadow of the bell tower, and the first ray of sun broke over Tri-Corner and hit empty stone where he'd stood. 5 days, Batman said from the dark, and I want to know everything about the cult digging in my city. Blade sheathed the sword. Knew you'd say that. Chapter 2, the first day, inventory. They went underground before the light could flank them, down through the cathedral's bones into the storm tunnels, and then miles through the dripping dark to the cave. Blade had heard the stories on the other side. Every world's vampires apparently told stories about this world's bat, but the stories hadn't prepared him for the cave. The scale of it. Cathedral-sized chambers strung with catwalks and cabling, a supercomputer like a black altar, an armory that would have made a shield quartermaster weep. And over all of it, dust. A fine gray film on the trophy cases, on the giant penny, on the empty costume in its glass tomb, The lived-in parts had contracted to a single workstation and a steel door at the back with a bar fridge hum behind it. Blade didn't have to ask what was in the fridge. He could smell it. Bagged blood, refrigerated, weeks old, rationed. Medical supply theft? He asked. Purchase, through shells. I take nothing this city needs. Batman moved through his own cave like a guest in it, Blade noticed, touching nothing. Expired stock mostly, slated for destruction. Expired bagged blood to a vampire is wet cardboard to a starving man, keeps you moving, doesn't feed what's actually hungry. Blade set his kit bag on the work table, started laying out gear with the ritual economy of a man who'd done it 10,000 times. Stakes, serum injectors, for himself, the thirst inhibitor he'd stopped pretending worked more than 4 hours. UV grenades, a field centrifuge. When's the last time you fed Liv? Silence. Detective, I'm your judge for the next 5 days. Lie to me even once and the test's over. 11 days ago. The cowl was off now. The face under it was worse than the cave's light. Handsome architecture collapsing into something drawn and papery, eyes sunk deep with a red sheen swimming far down in them like taillights underwater. A dying man, hit and run on the Aparo Expressway, driver fled, victim was gone regardless. Massive internal. He stopped. Started again, and the clinical armor of the sentence cracked down the middle. I told myself he was gone regardless. Was he? Yes. A pause that lasted a heartbeat too long. Probably. There it is, Blade thought. That probably is the whole man. Any other vampire buries the doubt with the body. This one keeps it on the books. Rules of the 5 days, Blade said. 1. No blood. Not bagged. Not dying man, probably not rat, not anything. The hunger comes off the leash completely because I need to see you against it. No buffers, no rations. 2. You patrol. Every night, like normal. Starving in a locked room is just dying slow. Any coward can do that. You go up there, into the city, into the smell of 10 million people, and you do the job clean. 3. I'm with you every hour. You don't get privacy. Privacy is where vampires cheat. 4. And Blade pulled a knife, drew it across his own forearm in a short, deliberate line, and let the wound scent the air between them. The change was instant and horrifying. Batman didn't move. That was the horrifying part. Every vampire Blade had ever tested this way, and he had tested many, in his fashion. Lunged, or at minimum went rigid fighting the lunge. Veins standing, fangs out, a hiss like a kettle. Batman simply stopped. Went so still he seemed to exit time. Only his eyes changed, the red rising up out of the deep of them like something ancient floating to the surface of a lake, and his hands flat on the table, pressed down until Blade heard the steel surface creak. 15 seconds. 30. The wound closed, Blade healed fast, and the scent faded, and Batman was still standing exactly there, pressed into the table, not breathing because he didn't need to, and wouldn't risk the taste of the air. 4, Blade finished quietly. I do that whenever I want, no warning. My blood's the worst thing in the world for your kind, calls to them like a dinner bell in a cathedral. You'll be smelling it for 5 days. When Batman finally spoke, his voice was gravel dragged over gravel. Understood. 1 question before we start the clock. Blade leaned on the table over the dents Batman's hands had left in it. The ledge. If I hadn't come through that rift, you'd have done it. Yes. Why today? Why not last week, next week? And Batman looked over at the empty costume in the glass case, and at a smaller case beside it that Blade now saw held a folded purple costume, a woman's, with a cat-eared cowl, and he said, Because 2 nights ago on a rooftop on Finger Avenue, I stopped a mugging. Standard intervention, 22 seconds. And when it was over, the victim tried to thank me, and I realized I was standing between her and the streetlight so she couldn't see my face, and I was counting her pulse. Not to assess her for shock. His jaw worked. Her pulse was 140 and dropping toward calm, and I was disappointed it was dropping because fear makes the blood. He shut his eyes. I have a rule, 1 rule left, the load-bearing one, and 2 nights ago I caught myself doing the hunger's math with an innocent woman's heartbeat, and I understood that the rule now has a countdown on it. I don't break rules, Blade. I remove myself from the board before I break rules. Blade nodded slowly. 11 days starved, and his confession is that he counted a pulse. Vampires I've hunted wore human finger bones as jewelry and slept fine. This man's ready to die over arithmetic. 5 days. He'll never make it. At 11 days out, he's already passed every recorded threshold. The hunger doubles roughly every 72 hours past the first week, which means by day 5 with me, he'll be somewhere no vampire's ever been while sane. He'll never make it. God help me, I want to see him try. Clock starts now, Blade said. Get some sleep. Tonight we hunt your city. Chapter 3, the second night. The Choir, Bruce, Day 2. Hour 31. 13 days without live blood, 41 hours without any blood at all. Document the symptoms. Documentation is control. Control is survival. Physical, fine tremor in both hands, 6-second cycle, suppressible for up to 4 minutes with focus. Joint pain, no. Precision bone pain. The femurs in the jaw, and ache like the marrow itself is hungry, which per Blade's field notes is exactly what's happening. The blood-forming tissue consumes itself first. Skin hypersensitive, the cape's weight registers as burning. Auditory acuity up 300% and climbing, which in Gotham is not a gift, it is the choir. The choir, I can hear heartbeats through walls now. Not one or two, all of them. From this rooftop, 400, 500. The tenement across Kane Street is 112 separate rhythms, syncopated, and every one of them is a voice saying the same word, and the word is, here, 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 reciting casework. Kane Street. Kane Street, the Falcone numbers racket, ran collection through the laundromat on the corner, 2009 to 2011. Above it, apartment 3C. I once reset a dislocated shoulder for an 11-year-old who wouldn't say who, 3C. There's a child's heartbeat in 3C right now. 90 beats a minute, light, quick, a sparrow, stop. Hallucination log because Blade requires it and because naming them strips them of a percentage of their power. Night 1, I saw Selena twice. Once in the reflection of the Finger Avenue windows, whole and alive and warm, holding out her wrist like an invitation. Once as I actually remember her at the end. I will not document that one further. Tonight the hunger has changed artists. Tonight it's been painting with Alfred's voice. Alfred, whom I will not think about, saying you require sustenance, Master Bruce. The way he said it 10,000 times over soup and sandwiches, the hunger repurposing 60 years of love as a lure. It is intelligent. That's what no one tells you. The thirst isn't an appetite, it's an interrogator. It's had 31 hours of unrestricted access to my memories, and it uses them like a man cracking a safe by feel. And underneath the choir and the interrogator, constant, patient, Blade's blood. He's 20 feet behind me on this rooftop, and his blood sings that impossible chord, sun and shadow, and the hunger has decided it is the finest thing in any universe, and it may be right. I have started dreaming about it during day sleep. I did not tell him that. I will tell him that. Rule of the 5 days, no lies. His blood is in my dreams, and in the dreams I am not sorry. Tremors back. Suppress. Count the rooftops to the clock tower 9. Count the... Heads up, detective. Blade's voice low. Southeast, ground level, 3 heartbeats moving wrong. Bruce was already turning. Even starving, especially starving. The senses triangulated instantly. An alley off Dini Place. 2 adult male heartbeats at rest plus adrenaline. 1 female heartbeat at 165 and spiking. 165, terror range. The hunger surged up his spine like 6 inches of ice water and said, plainly in his own voice, she'll taste like... He was off the roof before the sentence could finish itself, because motion was the only argument the hunger respected. The drop was 4 stories. He took it full, cape snapping open at the last possible second, theatrical, wasteful, necessary, because the 2 men had to see a monster fall out of the sky. That was the tool. Fear was the tool. Fear is the tool and not the appetizer, and he landed between the woman and the knives like judgment. What happened in the next 9 seconds, Blade watched from the roofline and would remember for the rest of his life. Blade, I've fought beside soldiers, hunted with Whistler 40 years, side by side with maybe a dozen humans and half-humans worth their weight. I know what control looks like under fire. I have never seen anything like this. 2 knife men, jacked on fear chemicals and something pharmaceutical, and the woman bleeding. That's the part the report needs to sit with. She was already cut. Forearm slash from grabbing at the blade, fresh blood open to the air in a closed alley, and he lands in the middle of it, 13 days starved. A vampire at 13 days in a room with fresh-cut prey does not have a mind. It has a trajectory. He took the first knife man with a wrist lock and a throw, textbook, human speed, deliberately human speed, I realized. He was governing himself down, denying the hunger the joy of full velocity, and put him into the wall unconscious. Second guy slashed wide, and Batman let it hit the gauntlet, disarmed him with 2 moves, and then had him pinned, throat bare, carotid 2 inches from a starving vampire's face, and the guy's pulse must have been 180, must have been a fire alarm going off against Batman's teeth, and the freak show is, nothing happened. He cuffed him. He read the wound on the woman. Pressure, angle, elevation, told her exactly how to hold her own arm, voice level as a surgeon's, and he called it in on the police band, and he stood there, upwind, upwind. He'd positioned himself upwind of her open wound without seeming to think about it, and he kept her calm for 6 minutes till the sirens got close, and then he was gone up the wall. I found him 2 roofs over, round the corner of a stairwell housing, on his knees, both fists against the concrete, pressed down like he was holding the building shut. Fangs fully out, first time I'd seen them, and they're not the neat needle points of a fresh vamp. They're the heavy fangs of a master, a Dracula's fangs, the bloodline shows, and his whole body locked in that terrible stillness, and blood on his face. His own. He'd bitten through his own lip to have something. Vampires can't feed on themselves. It's ash and vinegar to them, worse than nothing. And he knew that, and he'd done it anyway, the way a man in a fire holds his breath knowing it only buys seconds. I stood there and did the thing I do. Judged. Verdict, night 2. I have hunted vampires for over 30 years, and the strongest of them, the oldest, the most disciplined, could not have cuffed that second man. I could barely have cuffed that second man, and I've got human blood keeping my hands steady. He's operating at a depth of starvation with no recorded survivor, in a city that is one giant open vein, and his kill count for the night is 0 and his save count is 1, and he's on his knees behind a stairwell where no one can see him paying the bill for it, and he'd rather chew through his own lip than let the city see him shake. 3 more days of this. The hunger doubles by day 4. He won't make it. That's the second time I've thought that, and I notice I'm starting to say it the way you talk about a fighter you've got money on. Get it together, Blade. You're the judge. Judges don't root. He crouched down beside the kneeling vampire, forearms on knees, and for a while said nothing at all. The city ran its sirens below. The woman will keep the arm, Blade said finally. Clean slash. You had her holding it right. I know, a voice from underground. You were upwind of her the whole 6 minutes. I know. That wasn't luck. No. Batman's fists unclenched from the roof, 1 finger at a time, a manual override. It's a protocol. I have 41 of them now. Wind position, never touch bare skin. Count my footsteps instead of their pulses. Recite case files and Alfred's. The voice, snagged, recovered. In a trusted voice to crowd the choir out. Bite the lip. Pain interrupts the feeding reflex for between 8 and 11 seconds, and 8 seconds is enough to leave a rooftop. He turned his head. The red in his eyes was high tide now, but the man was still behind it, looking out. You wanted to see me against it with no buffers. This is it, Blade. This is all I am now. 41 small walls and the knowledge of what happens if any one of them fails. How close was it tonight? Truth. Batman was quiet for a long moment. The second man, when I had him pinned. There was a moment, perhaps a third of a second, where I had already decided. The words came out precise and terrible. The decision was made. I was in motion internally. The bite was happening in every way except the last 6 inches. And what stopped it wasn't the code or the woman watching or the mission. He looked at his own hands. It was that 31 hours ago on a table in my cave a man bet on me. And I have lost everything else, but I have never once lost a bet someone made on me being stronger than I am. Well, Blade thought, something moving in his chest that he decided not to examine. There goes objectivity. 3 more days, Blade said, standing, offering his hand, bare hand, open wrist, pulse side up, the cruelest test on the sheet. Batman looked at the wrist. The choir sang. The chord in the Daywalker's blood sang over it. Sun and shadow, the finest thing in any universe. He took the hand grip to grip, forearm to forearm like a soldier, turning the wrist away from his own mouth in the same motion, and let Blade pull him to his feet. 3 more days, he said. Chapter 4, The Fourth Night, The Breaking Depth. There is a depth in the ocean below which no light has ever reached, where the pressure is so total that the creatures who live there are built around it, organized by it, and would rupture if you brought them up into relief. By the 4th night, Bruce Wayne lived there. Hour 94, he told himself, and the number arrived slowly, dragged up from somewhere because numbers had begun to resist him. Document the symptoms are everything. The symptom is the world. The choir was no longer 400 voices, it was Gotham entire, 10 million hearts, and he had stopped being able to hear them as sound. He heard them as taste now, synesthetic, the whole city on his tongue at once, iron and salt and copper and warmth, warmth, warmth. Rain had come in off the bay, and the rain made it worse, because the rain made the city humid, and the humidity carried everything. Every open wound in every emergency room, every butcher shop, every skinned knee on every child in every one of 100,000 apartments, a fog of life he had to walk through and refuse forever. His protocols were failing in sequence like lights going out down a corridor. Protocol 9, recite case files, had failed at hour 70. The hunger had learned to interrupt the recitations with edits. He would be 3 sentences into the Grissom file, and the hunger would supply, in his own voice, in perfect bat cadence, victim exsanguinated. And wasn't that a waste? All that evidence spilled on the ground when it could have. Protocol 15, count your own footsteps, failed at hour 80, when he realized he'd been counting Blade's heartbeats instead for 6 blocks without noticing the substitution. Protocol 1, never be alone with a sleeping human, did not fail, but only because Blade enforced it, walking checkpoint between Batman and the world. The hallucinations had stopped announcing themselves. That was the terrifying development of Night 4. The hunger had gotten good. Selina no longer appeared glowing in windows. She appeared plausible, at the edge of crowds in a raincoat, glancing at him and away. Alfred no longer spoke from empty air. He spoke from the comm unit. In perfect fidelity, indistinguishable from memory. Gentle, "You've done enough, sir. No one could say you haven't done enough." Twice Bruce answered aloud before he caught it. Blade, to his eternal credit, said nothing either time, just moved closer, kept his heartbeat where Bruce could count it, 61, 60, 61, a metronome against the choir. At hour 96, on a rooftop above Robinson Park, Bruce's legs stopped. Not buckled, stopped. The body, 16 days starved of live blood, 4 days starved of everything, simply declined the next instruction. He went down onto one knee with the terrible dignity of a felled cathedral and could not rise, and the hunger, sensing structural failure, came up out of the deep with everything it had. It did not come as appetite, it came as an argument, and it had been preparing the argument for 4 days, and it was, he had to concede, magnificent. It came as Gotham. It showed him the city he could be. Not a monster in an alley. The hunger was far past crude offers now. It showed him a Gotham, where Batman fed tactically, ethically from the worst. A renewable resource, Gotham would never run out of the worst, and was fast again, and clear again, and strong the way he'd been strong for one obscene beautiful week after Dracula died with the Count's stolen power still burning in his veins. It showed him crime statistics. It showed him graphs. The hunger had learned to speak fluent Batman. It presented a fully costed proposal. One predator, properly fed, saves more lives per annum than one scrupulous corpse. Run the projection. You always run the projection. Run it. And he knelt in the rain at the breaking depth, and he ran it. And then he did the thing that Blade, watching from 10 feet away, sword loose in its sheath, closer to drawing it than he would ever admit, saw only from the outside as a starving vampire kneeling motionless in the rain for 4 full minutes. He found the flaw in the proposal. Selina. The flaw was Selina, because the hunger's beautiful graph had a first data point, and the first data point was a night 2 years ago, and the proposal required him to say her death had been the reasonable price of operational efficiency, and it wasn't. It was the wound that had never closed and never would and never should, because the moment it closed, the moment her death became a line item, that was the monster. Not the fangs, not the feeding, the accounting. The monster was the version of him that could make her death make sense. No, he said, out loud. To the rain, to the choir, to the interrogator wearing his own voice, just no. And the hunger, for the first time in 2 years, had no counter-argument on file. Blade 4 minutes on his knees. I clocked it. 4 minutes with his eyes shut in the rain while something happened inside him that registered on my skin like standing near a transformer. And when he opened his eyes and said no to the empty air, the red in them had gone down. Not out, down, like a fire that just lost an argument with a wall. Then he tried to stand and couldn't and put a hand out, and I want the record to show what he did because I've been building the record all week and this goes at the top. His hand was falling toward my forearm, bare skin available, my blood 1 bite away. Him at hour 96 of a starvation depth no vampire in recorded history has survived sane, and he corrected the fall. Mid-collapse, caught my shoulder instead, armored, safe, 16 days starving and drowning, and he still steered. I've been running my own count this week next to his. Every hour a tally does he snap. 96 marks in the column, 96 no's, and somewhere around mark 70 I stopped being a judge collecting evidence and became something I haven't been since Whistler died, which is a man standing watch over someone he does not intend to lose. Day 5 is a formality. I knew it in the rain over Robinson Park, but he doesn't get to know it yet because there's one test left, the real one, the one I've never given anybody, and it isn't for him. It's for me. Because what comes after the verdict costs me something too, and I need to be sure. He got the vampire's arm over his shoulders, Batman weighed like a statue himself, and walked him toward the roof access and home. Almost there, Detective. 96, Batman said, barely audible. Hours. You counting? You're counting, the vampire said, into the rain, with what Blade realized after a stunned second was the ghost of dry humor, delivered from the bottom of the ocean. I'm verifying your work. Yeah, Blade thought. He makes it to 5. Chapter 5, the 5th day, verdict the 5th day. Blade broke his own rules. He let Batman sleep through the daylight hours in the cave's cryptarch, and while the vampire slept his corpse-still day sleep, Blade sat at the great black computer with a bag of his gear and did chemistry. His mother's old trade winding through his hands. Whistler's field methods. 30 years of serum work. He drew his own blood into glass vials, 6 of them, dark red shading to something that caught light strangely at the meniscus. He ran the centrifuge. He studied the cave's medical suite, which was better than most hospitals. He read, because the computer had unlocked for him at some point on day 3, a grant of trust neither of them had remarked on, the complete file Batman kept on his own condition. 2 years of self-documentation. Blood chemistry panels the vampire had run on himself. Failed cure attempts, 4 of them, annotated with a pathologist's dispassion. A folder labeled Contingency, RW Omega, that was the sunlight protocol, timed, mapped, the cathedral roof selected for its clean eastern exposure, and dated, the date was 5 days ago, and Blade read it once and closed it and sat in the dark for a while. At sunset, Batman rose. He came up out of the cryptarch moving like a man carrying an anvil, made it to the medical suite and stood while Blade ran the final panels. Hour 120. His hands had passed beyond trembling into a fixed rigidity. His skin had gone translucent at the temples, the starved veins beneath it dark and empty as dry riverbeds. The red in his eyes no longer receded at all. It simply waited, banked, watching everything, while the man operated the body around it. Last test, Blade said. Understood. The voice was Ash. What's the scenario? No scenario. Blade pulled a chair around and sat, and took off his dark glasses, which he had not done all week, and looked at the vampire with his bare eyes, with his mother's eyes, the only thing she'd had time to give him. Just a question, and the rule of the 5 days still holds, no lies. You pass. You already passed. You passed at hour 96 in the rain, and if I'm honest, you passed on the ledge when you stepped back with 3 minutes of dark left. Because dying was the plan you'd already made, and changing the plan cost you more than keeping it. So the verdict's not the question. Here's the question. Blade leaned forward. If I give you this, the bite, the change, daylight, the hunger on a chain, you don't get the ledge anymore. Ever. Contingency RW Omega gets deleted tonight. Not because you can't burn, you probably still could, but because you won't be able to justify it. The threat gets removed, so the removal protocol dies with it. Which means you go back to the long war. Decades of it. Gotham every night. No exit clause. No sunrise waiting as the mercy at the end of the math. Living detective. Not enduring until an honorable end. Living. On and on with everything you've lost, staying lost. He held the red-banked eyes. The hunger I can fix. That I can't. So the last question of the test is the first question I ask myself on that roof, not whether you're strong enough to be a daywalker. Do you want to be one? Do you want to live? The cave was silent except for the bats, far up, and the river, far down. And Bruce Wayne, at hour 120, at the breaking depth, looked past Blade's shoulder, at the glass case that held her folded purple costume, and was quiet for a long time, and no lie was in the room when he finally spoke. 5 days ago, the honest answer was no. His voice found something underneath the ash. I planned my death the way I planned everything, as a solution, the last case, close it clean. And then a stranger walked out of a hole in the world and asked me to hold on for 5 days, and I want the record to reflect that the 5 days were worse than dying, every hour of them. A breath he didn't need, and I would not trade them, because somewhere in the middle, Robinson Park, the rain, I can give you the timestamp. I stopped fighting the hunger to pass your test and started fighting it because I remembered that I am not finished. The cult digging for the Count's ashes, the rift, your Dracula still walking your world, Gotham's long war. He straightened, vertebra by vertebra, an anvil-carrying man setting the anvil down. I don't know if want is a word I have full access to anymore, Blade, but I know this. Yesterday the mission was a reason to delay dying. Today dying would interrupt the mission. That's not the same man. He extended his hand, steady, by pure will, one last time. So yes, ask me properly so it's on the record. Yes, I want to live. Blade looked at the offered hand for a moment, then stood, ignored it, and clasped the forearm instead, grip to grip, the soldier's way, the way Batman had taught him on a rooftop 3 nights ago. Verdict rendered, Blade said, worthy. First one in 30 years. Something moved behind his bare eyes. For what it's worth, I've bled on 6 continents looking for one vampire who could hold the line. Figures I'd have to leave the universe to find him. The bite, Batman said. Detective to the end, already 3 steps ahead into the operational details. Tonight, then the hard part. Blade put his glasses back on. My bite starts the change. Rewrites the thirst at the root, begins grafting my physiology onto yours. Daywalker's a hybrid state, half in, half out, and I was born this way. My body's had a lifetime to balance on the wire. Yours will be balancing on it after 2 years as a full vampire of a Dracula's bloodline. Without a stabilizer, the graft fails in 72 hours and you come out the other side worse than you went in, or you don't come out at all. So we build the stabilizer. Permanent serum, my blood is the base. But I've seen your blood work, detective, and there's something in your turning that isn't biology. The Count didn't just infect you. He inherited into you. There's architecture in your blood that my chemistry can't touch. Magic, Batman said with the specific weariness of a rational man who has lost that war already. Magic. So the science needs a scientist and the curse needs curse breakers, you know, people? For the first time in 5 days, perhaps for the first time in 2 years, the thing that crossed the vampire's ruined face was very nearly a smile. I know people, Batman said. You're not going to like one of them. Chapter 6, the bite they did it in the cave, at the stone heart of it, on the flat rock shelf above the underground river where the mineral dark was oldest, Blade's choice. Not the med bay, he'd said. This part isn't medicine. Batman knelt on the stone. It was the only time in 5 days Blade had asked him to kneel, and he'd explained why with characteristic economy. You're a Dracula-line vampire at the bottom of the worst starvation on record. The second my blood hits your mouth's proximity, every instinct you have left is going to detonate. Kneeling adds a half-second to your lunge. I've done this math before. You've done this before, Bitten someone to turn them toward the light instead of away from it? Blade drew the knife, the silver one, and cut his own palm, deep, deliberate, letting the impossible blood well up black-red in the dark. The cord of it filled the cave instantly, sun and shadow, and Batman's whole starved body rang with it like a struck bell. No, nobody's done this before, that's why you knelt. Comforting, you want comfort or you want daylight. Blade knelt too, facing him, close, and his voice dropped into a register Batman hadn't heard from him, older, almost liturgical, Whistler's cadences and his mother's Bible underneath. Listen, before I do this, my mother was bitten while I was still inside her. I never chose this blood. Spent my whole life treating it like a curse I was aiming at the enemy. So understand what's happening here, because it's a first for both of us. I've never once given this blood away. It was always taken from her, and I always took it back out of them, one kill at a time. The bleeding hand closed into a fist. Tonight it gets given, freely, to a man who earned it. Whatever's holy in that, whatever's in it of her, you carry it now too, don't waste it. I won't. 2 words, Granite. Then here's the order of operations. I bite, clean, carotid, controlled, and the reflex is going to scream at you to bite back, and you don't, not yet, you hold, because the venom has to go one way first, my hybrid factor into your blood, or the graft takes wrong. You hold until I say. Then, only then, my palm, you feed. First real feed in 16 days and it'll be my blood, which your hunger has been dreaming about all week, so this is the last test. After the last test, you take 3 swallows and you stop on my word. You stop starving and starved mid-feed on a word. Can you do that? The red eyes met the dark glasses. Say the word now, Batman said, so I know its shape. Sunrise. Then yes. Blade nodded once, took the cowl's edge and drew it back and down, baring the throat. And Bruce let him, which was its own enormity. 2 years of never once being touched, never once being bare. Hold on to something, Detective, Blade said. Both of us are about to find out what we're made of. And the Daywalker struck. The bite was nothing like the Count's. That was the first thing, the thing Bruce would try and fail to put language around for years afterward. Dracula's bite had been theft, an unlocking and an emptying, cold hands going through the house of him taking everything. Blade's bite was the opposite verb entirely. It poured. Heat first, a thin, fierce thread of it going into the carotid, and then branching, mapping him from the inside, racing down starved dry riverbed veins that hadn't carried warmth in 2 years, and behind the heat, light, not metaphor. His optic nerves fired in the blackness of the cave, gold, white gold, dawn gold, the exact color he'd stood on a cathedral roof waiting to die inside of, now arriving through his blood instead of his skin, and where it passed, the hunger, the choir, the interrogator, the ancient red tenant, screamed. It screamed and fought and clawed at the walls of him, feeling itself be rewritten, feeling the old dark inheritance of the Count met by something engineered in a woman's dying love and forged across 30 years of war. And Bruce knelt in the middle of the battlefield of his own bloodstream, fists cracking the stone shelf beneath him, holding. Now, Blade rasped, tearing free, blood at his mouth, palm coming up. Feed. 3 swallows. The first was annihilation, 16 days of starvation slamming shut on the finest thing in any universe, and the hunger surging up to seize the process, more, forever, all of it. The second was war. Man and hunger with their hands on the same wheel. The third, Bruce took slowly, deliberately, tasting it, the sun and shadow, the mother in it, the givenness of it, a communion instead of a kill. Sunrise, Blade said, and Batman stopped. Pulled back from the bleeding palm with the hunger detonating in outrage behind his teeth, sat back on his heels, closed his mouth, closed his eyes, and stopped. And knelt there shaking with dawn gold light crawling visibly along the veins of his throat like slow lightning. Changing, mid-metamorphosis on a rock above an underground river. Blade sat back too, suddenly bone-tired, binding his palm, watching the impossible, the red draining out of the vampire's eyes by degrees, and underneath it, for the first time since a rooftop 5 days ago, blue. 72 hours, Blade said quietly. That's the window. Then the graft fails or the serum holds it forever. He rose and stood over the kneeling, burning, becoming man and put his good hand briefly on the armored shoulder. "Make your calls, detective. Get me your scientist and your curse breakers. Time to make it permanent." Chapter 7. The scientist and the curse breakers, Lucius Fox, arrived first, at midnight, in a raincoat over pajamas, carrying 2 hard cases and 30 years of never asking the wrong question. He had known for a year. Bruce had never told him. Lucius had simply started noticing the requisitions, the refrigeration units, the UV-shielded transport, certain hematology equipment, ordered through the same shells that used to order Kevlar, and had run the only hypothesis that fit, and had grieved privately, and had kept building whatever was asked, because that had always been the arrangement. Mr. Wayne provides the mission, I provide the means, and neither of us insults the other with explanations. He walked into the cave, saw Bruce standing at the medical bay with gold light moving under the skin of his throat like something alive, saw the leather-armored stranger with the sword, and set his cases down. "Well," Lucius said mildly, taking off his rain-spotted glasses to clean them, "I assume there's a blood sample you'd like me to look at, and a deadline you're going to apologize for." 66 hours, Bruce said. "I'm sorry, Lucius. 66 hours. Lucius put his glasses back on and looked at Blade. "And this gentleman is?" "The donor," Blade said. Lucius studied him for a moment, the sword, the stance, the dark glasses in a dark cave, and then extended his hand with the unflappable courtesy of a man who had once been asked to invoice a spacecraft as agricultural equipment. "Lucius Fox, I'll need your medical history, your hematological baseline, and, forgive me, several vials of what I suspect is the most dangerous substance I'll ever put in a centrifuge." "Blade, you'll get all 3. Fair warning, my blood's killed everything that ever tried to steal it." "Then it's fortunate," Lucius said, already opening his cases, "that I intend to ask it nicely." The curse breakers arrived, 2 hours later, and they arrived arguing. The cave's proximity sensors caught them a half-mile out in the dark of the access road, no vehicle, which was the first wrongness, and walking side by side, which per the file Bruce had pulled up for Blade, "You're not going to like one of them," was apparently the second. The woman moved like a stage performer, coat swirling, spine straight, projecting to a back row that wasn't there. The man moved like a suspect leaving a betting shop, shoulders hunched into a rumpled trench coat, a lit cigarette making a small angry firefly against the night. And his voice arrived on the sensors before he did. "All I'm saying, love, is when the bloody Batman sends up a flare asking for magical help, the correct professional response is to move to a different hemisphere, not to please reply with a +1. You came, John." "Course I came. Never said I was a professional." Jean Constantine and Zatanna Zatara walked into the cave and stopped, and took in the tableau. Batman, gold-veined and blue-eyed, half-transformed, the daywalker on the med table with a line in his arm feeding a centrifuge, Lucius Fox conducting an orchestra of glassware. Zatanna's stage composure flickered, grief crossing her face, quick and real, because she had known. Everyone in the life had known what had happened to Bruce, and none of them had been able to touch it. "Bruce, your eyes. It's a long story." "It's a 5-day story," Blade said from the table. "I'll give you the field brief, then I need to know if the 2 of you can do what your files say you can do." Constantine dropped into a chair uninvited and lit a new cigarette off the old one. His eyes, hung over, ancient, missing nothing, went from Blade to Bruce and back, and narrowed. "Half-blood," he said. "Born, not bitten. Blimey, you're the real thing, aren't you? The walking sunrise. Heard rumors there was one of you somewhere in the multiverse's attic." He exhaled smoke and squinted at Bruce, and whatever he looked with wasn't his eyes. "And you've started grafting your daylight onto his nibs here, over the top of a Dracula inheritance. That's not an infection, mate, that's a bloody coronation. The Count didn't just turn him, he made him the heir. There's a throne in this man's blood, and it's still warm." Silence in the cave. Bruce went very still, the old stillness. "Explain," he said. "Kings of the blood don't die like the rank and file, do they? Big D goes up in flames, but the office, the dark authority, the thing that made him Dracula rather than just some old leech, that has to go somewhere. Law of conservation of nasty. It flowed downhill into the strongest vessel of his line still standing, which, seeing as you'd personally dusted the rest of the family, Constantine pointed the cigarette at Bruce, is you, Squire. Congratulations. It's why your hunger's been worse than it should be. You've not just been fighting a vampire's thirst for 2 years. You've been refusing a crown. And that, Zatanna said slowly, working it through, is why the graft is unstable. Blade's factor is rewriting the biology, but the inheritance is a covenant. It's written in older ink, in 72. She checked Bruce's throat, the moving gold. 64 hours. The covenant is going to finish deciding that the Daywalker blood is a usurper, and it will burn the graft out root and branch. Unless, Constantine agreed, and for once there was no flippancy in it. Unless what? Blade said. Zatanna and Constantine exchanged the look of two people who have survived several apocalypses together and priced each other's souls accurately. Unless we get there first, Zatanna said. A binding. We don't fight the inheritance. We can't. It predates every tradition I own. We rededicate it. The covenant needs a throne. We give it a new one. We bind the dark authority itself to Bruce's code, to the rule, the load-bearing rule. And then we seal Blade's factor into the binding as the enforcement mechanism, with Lucius's serum as the physical anchor, so body and covenant can't ever drift apart again. Science holds the flesh. The ritual holds the crown. The crown holds the code. She blew out a breath. It's never been done. It's insane. It requires a blood freely given, a will that is never broken, and a true name spoken at the center of a working that will attract the attention of everything hungry within 9 realms. We've got the first 2 on tap, Constantine said. He took a long drag and looked at Bruce, and his voice went quiet and dead serious, the con man burning off to show the exorcist underneath. The name's the cost, mate, and you should hear it plain before you nod. Bindings run on truth. At the center of this one, you don't get to be the Batman. The dark won't take an oath from a symbol. Symbols are masks, and it's made of masks. You'll have to stand in the middle of the worst thing that ever happened to you, crown pressing down, hunger off the leash one final time, and be Bruce Wayne out loud, every broken piece of him, and mean it. If there's one lie left in you when you speak, 1 inch of you still planning a cathedral rooftop for later, the Covenant will find it, and it'll take the throne back, and God help this city then. He tapped ash onto the pristine cave floor. So, 64 hours. Lucius cooks, Z and I draw the architecture, the Daywalker donates, and you, Bruce, you spend the time deciding whether you can tell the truth. Bruce looked at Constantine, at Zatanna, at Lucius, who had not stopped pipetting but had not missed a word. At Blade. Start drawing, he said. Chapter 8, 64 hours. What followed was the strangest sprint of 5 strange lives. Lucius worked like a man 20 years younger, sleeves rolled, the medbay transformed into something between a pharmaceutical lab and a forge. Blade's blood, he discovered within the first 6 hours, was not merely unusual, it was opinionated. It attacked reagents it deemed hostile. It cooperated with others. Mr. Blade, your hemoglobin just outmaneuvered my assay. I've been doing this 40 years. I'm going to need a moment. The stabilizing serum built itself around a lattice of Blade's hybrid factor, Bruce's own pre-turning DNA recovered from the cave's medical archives. So the body remembers whose house this is, Lucius said, and a synthetic carrier that Fox designed, tested, and redesigned 9 times, sleeping in 90-minute increments on a cot Alfred had once kept for a boy who wouldn't leave the cave. Blade gave blood until even his regeneration complained, then gave the thing that cost more, information, everything. 30 years of serum chemistry, his own physiology's secrets, the failures, Whistler's notebooks reproduced from memory onto the cave servers, because Lucius needed the failures more than the successes. You're handing them the keys to killing you, said the old cold voice of 30 years of trust in nothing. I know, Blade told it, watching Lucius work, watching Zatanna chalk silver geometry across the stone shelf above the river, watching Constantine bully the cave's ley alignment into cooperation with a fistful of stolen relics and language that made the bats leave. That's the point. That's what given means. Zatanna and Constantine built the working the way old partners fight, brutally efficient, arguing constantly, correcting each other mid-incantation. The circle they raised on the stone shelf was nothing like the movies. It was engineering, load paths and grounding lines, a silver-chalked architecture the size of a helipad with the flat rock at its center where a man would kneel, and around it, at 3 points, stations for anchor, voice, and blade. And Bruce spent 64 hours doing the assignment, deciding if he could tell the truth. He did it the only way he knew, forensically. He went through the manor above for the first time in 2 years, Blade shadowing him, saying nothing, through the sheeted furniture and the stopped clocks. He stood in the doorway of Alfred's room, which he had not opened since, and opened it. He sat for an hour with the folded purple costume, and when he came back down into the cave, his eyes were terrible and clear. At hour 60 of 64, the gold light under his skin began to gutter, flickering like a pilot light in wind. The Covenant, waking up, choosing. "It's time," Zatanna said. Chapter 9, The Binding. They took their stations at moonset, the deadest hour, the river running black beneath the shelf. Lucius at the anchor point, north, with the serum, a single injector of liquid that shifted color as you watched, gold to red to gold, 64 hours of the best work of his life in 11 milliliters. Zatanna at the Voice, west, her stagecoat traded for working blacks, her father's amulet at her throat. Constantine at the third point, east, holding not a relic but a knife of cold iron and a lit cigarette he had been informed twice he could not have inside the circle, and had kept anyway. It's a sensor, Z, it's liturgical. Blade stood just outside the silver lines, sword drawn, because his role in the architecture was the one he'd held all his life, the guardian at the edge of the light, facing the dark. Constantine had been blunt about it. A working this loud is a dinner bell. Anything that slips the wards, you kill it. Don't be polite. And Bruce knelt on the flat rock at the center, unarmored. That had been the final requirement, and the hardest. No suit, no cowl, slacks, and a bare chest mapped with 2 years of scars that shouldn't scar, and had the Covenant marking its territory, and the gold light guttering along his veins like a candle at the end of itself. "Last chance to leg it," Constantine said, almost kindly. "Begin," said Bruce Wayne. Zatanna began to speak, backwards, the words leaving her mouth and unhappening in the air, syllables of reversed intention that laid over the silver geometry like current over wire, and the circle lit. Not with light, with pressure. The cave's darkness thickened and organized. The river ran quieter, and down in the center of the working, in the blood of the kneeling man, something ancient sat up on its throne and paid attention. "Emok," Zatanna commanded. "Enwork, was Flesroy." It came. Bruce would try later to file it as a hallucination and would fail, because everyone in the circle saw it, the shadow that stood up out of his shadow. Vast, antlered with the suggestion of a crown that was also a crown of bats, red-eyed, wearing his face the way a portrait in a burned house wears a face. The inheritance, the office of Dracula, dispossessed and furious, and it looked down at its kneeling vessel and spoke in a voice that arrived not through the air but through the marrow of everyone present. "Mine," it said, "blood of my blood, last of my line. You burned the father and the court, and so all that they were pooled in you. 2 years you have refused the throne and called your refusal virtue. It was only hunger's foreplay. Kneel longer. You kneel so well." "Hold the lines," Constantine barked. The silver geometry was smoking at the joints. Outside the circle, at the edge of the dark, things had begun to arrive. Drawn things, hungry things, shapes at the wards. And Blade's sword began its work in a whisper of arcs. The guardian at the edge doing what he was born doing, buying the light its time. "Bruce?" Zatanna's voice strained through the working. "The name. It has to be now. The truth. All of it. Speak." And the crown leaned down over its kneeling vessel, and the hunger, the whole of it, 2 years of it, off the leash by ritual design one final time, poured into him like a sea, and at the bottom of that sea, Bruce Wayne opened his mouth and told the truth. "My name is Bruce Wayne." The circle shuddered. The crown laughed, marrow deep. "A name is not a truth." "My name is Bruce Wayne," he said again, louder. "And I was 8 years old in an alley and I could not save them. Everything I built out of that. The bat, the war, the rule, I told the world it was justice, and I told myself it was justice, and under the justice, at the root, it was a promise to a dead woman's pearls, never again, not while I stand. And 2 years ago I broke the promise. I couldn't save Selina. I couldn't save Alfred from me. His voice tore and he drove it forward anyway, forensic, relentless, prosecuting himself to the marrow. And I could not save myself, and so I planned my death, and called that justice too. The last case, it was not justice. It was surrender wearing justice's face, and I know the difference now because 5 days ago a stranger bet on me, and I held 120 hours I held, and in the rain over Robinson Park, I found the bottom of myself and there was no monster there. There was a boy in an alley, still keeping his promise. The gold in his veins flared, guttering no more. So hear the truth, Crown Covenant, whatever you are. I am Bruce Wayne. I am the boy and the promise and the rule. The rule is no one dies, not the innocent, not the guilty, not me. And you may have my blood, because blood was always the least of me, but you will wear my law or you will starve on your throne forever. I do not kneel to you. He stood up. Inside the circle, inside the sea of his own hunger, under the crown's full weight, at the center of a working that was burning the silver off the stone, Bruce Wayne stood up. I knight you. Now, Constantine roared. Z, the enthronement, Fox, the anchor, Daywalker, the sun. 3 things happened in 1 second. Zatanna spoke the binding's keystone, a word so thoroughly reversed it seemed to unsay itself before it was said, and the crown, lunging down at its rebel vessel in fury, struck the architecture of the working and was caught, and bent and rededicated. The whole vast antlered authority of it slammed down out of the air and into the shape of Bruce's spoken law like a river forced into a turbine. Lucius Fox stepped over the smoking silver line without a millisecond's hesitation, 68 years old in his shirt sleeves, into the heart of a magical detonation, because Mr. Wayne needed him to, and drove the injector home into Bruce's jugular, 11 milliliters of gold-red anchor, science's signature at the bottom of Magic's contract. And Blade, turning from the wards where the last drawn thing lay in 2 pieces, did the final station's work. He vaulted the line, seized Bruce's forearm grip to grip, soldier's clasp, tore the binding off his own scarred palm from the bite 5 days past, and pressed the open wound to the injection site. Blood freely given, a second time, sealing the covenant with the only substance in any universe the crown could not argue with, the walking sunrise, delivered by hand, by a brother. The cave went white. Not fire, dawn. For 3 full seconds, sourceless daybreak filled the great chamber floor to unseen ceiling. 10,000 bats rising in a storm of wings, the river running molten gold, every shadow in the oldest dark in Gotham burned back to the stone. And at the center of it, a man stood upright in the light with his eyes open, unburning, and the hunger inside him, the choir, the interrogator, the sea, the crown, knelt. It did not die. That was the covenant's honesty. That was what Constantine had meant about truth. It would never die. It folded itself down and down and down into a single dark thread at the core of him, leashed, dedicated, knighted. And where its voice had been for 2 years, there was something Bruce had forgotten existed. Quiet. The light faded. The cave returned. The 5 of them stood in the wreck of the circle, breathing, those who breathed, in the ringing silence. Constantine broke it naturally. He looked at his cigarette, which had gone out, and lit it with a hand that was not quite steady. Well, he said, I've seen kings crowned and I've seen kings killed. Never seen a man make the crown swear fealty. He exhaled. Drinks are on somebody else. Bruce looked down at his own hands, steady, warm, actually warm, blood moving in them with a rhythm he hadn't owned in 2 years, a heartbeat. Slow, strong, his and not only his. He looked up at Blade. It's quiet, he said, and his voice cracked on the word like ice going out of a river in spring. Yeah, Blade said. Welcome to the daylight, brother. Chapter 10, Daybreak. Bruce Wayne watched the sunrise from the cathedral roof. He had chosen the same ledge deliberately. It would not have been him to choose otherwise. and he stood on it in street clothes, cowlless, hands in his coat pockets, while the east went burn-colored and then rose and then, at 6:41 a.m., broke open over Tricorner Yards and hit him full in the face. Warmth. Nothing else. No fire, no verdict. Just the sun on his skin for the first time in 2 years, ordinary and vast, and the harbor lighting up gold, and gulls, and the city he had planned to leave from this exact stone shivering awake below him in a million windows. Blade stood beside him, arms crossed. He had insisted on being there. First sunrise is the graft's final exam. If anything's going to fail, it fails now. But the medical pretext had been thin, and both of them knew it. Some things you stand watch for. They stood in the light a long time. Report, Blade said eventually, because sentiment had a budget. Full spectrum tolerance, no photic pain response. Thirst is... Bruce paused, checking the quiet the way a man checks a healed wound. The dark thread was there at the core, leashed and dedicated. When he reached for it deliberately, it answered like a drawn bow. Strength, speed, senses, the whole terrible inheritance, on tap and on his terms. When he let it go, it went. Present, governed. It's like the difference between a flood and a reservoir. That's the Daywalk. Took me 20 years to build the reservoir. You got it in 5 days and one very loud ritual. Blade shook his head slowly. The strength'll run deeper than mine, too. You've got a crown down there paying taxes. I've just got my mother's stubbornness. From what I've seen, that's the stronger currency. They watched a container ship crawl the harbor. Lucius finished the blood work at 4, Bruce said. The serum's holding at 100%. Permanent bond. The covenant and the biology aren't two systems anymore. They're one system. His words were, "It's not that the cure is stable, Mr. Wayne. It's that there's nothing left to cure. This is simply what you are now." A pause. Constantine's translation was less clinical. I heard Constantine's translation. Woke up the bats. Blade almost smiled. Then it faded and he took off the dark glasses in the full sun. A thing Bruce understood by now was Blade's version of removing the cowl, and looked at him. So, that's my end of the deal delivered. Daylight, the leash, the rest of your life, however long a day-walking heir to a dead crown lives, which by my math is, we'll see, which brings us to the account that's still open. The hunter's flatness came back into his voice, but underneath it now, permanent, was the other thing. My universe, my Dracula, awake, walking, feeding, while I stand on a roof in someone else's world watching a sunrise. Every day I'm here, his math compounds. And the Ashen Court still got at least one door between the worlds, and there's a cult in your city digging for your count's ashes. We've got 2 Draculas worth of unfinished business across 2 universes, detective, and 1 working rift that belongs to the enemy. Then, we take the rift away from the enemy, Bruce said, and we make our own. Blade looked at him. We, Blade repeated. You crossed a universe to confirm a grave. Instead, you spent 5 days pulling a stranger back from a ledge, gave him your blood twice, your mother's inheritance, and 30 years of your partner's research. Bruce turned from the sunrise, and his eyes, blue with dawn gold living at the bottom of them now, the Covenant's watermark, were absolutely level. I've run the math, Blade. It's how I pray. Your Dracula is the largest single debt on the board, and I'm now the only being in 2 universes purpose-built to help you collect it. Beyond that, you said it yourself on the first night. I'm the only man who's killed one. He extended his forearm. Gotham has the Fox, the League, the Network. It held for 2 years with a monster guarding it. It will hold for missions with a knight. Your world has been alone with its monster for long enough. Partners, full stop. Your war is my war now. The blood in my veins says so, and I keep my blood's promises. I have exactly 1 data point on that, but it's a strong one. Blade looked at the offered forearm. At the man. 30 years of trusting exactly 1 person, and that person in the ground, and the cold, reliable math saying what it had always said, alone is safer, alone is cleaner. Everyone you stand next to becomes either a casualty or a liability. Yeah, Blade told the math. You've been wrong before, 6 days ago, on this roof, overruled. He clasped the forearm, grip to grip, the soldier's way, their way. Blood brothers, Blade said. God help both universes. Chapter 11. The door it took 11 weeks. 9 of them to find and burn out the Ashen Court's foothold in Gotham, a pilgrim cell of 14, nested in the drowned sub-basements of the old Gotham Cathedral Archdiocese, sifting consecrated ashes for a dead king's remains. The new partnership's first campaign, and the city's underworld learned quickly that something fundamental had changed. The Bat now worked daylight hours when it chose, worked with someone, and the someone carried a sword and left considerably less to interrogate. They recovered the cells, Rift engine intact, a horror of scavenged court sorcery and stolen STR Labs hardware powered by something in a lead glass jar that Constantine took one look at and refused to name indoors. 2 more weeks to rebuild it into something sane. They did the work in the cave, all 5 of them again, the crew of the Binding reassembled and none of them pretending very hard that they'd needed persuading. Lucius reverse-engineered the court's spatial hardware and then quietly exceeded it, building a gate frame of Wayne Aerospace alloys down on the old subway platform below the cave, a standing ellipse 9 feet high, cabled into the cave's fusion cell. Zatanna and Constantine rebuilt the sorceress side from first principles. Theirs was a wound opener, ours is a door, and doors have frames, hinges, and locks, and know their owner. Layering the frame with wards, homing sigils, and an anchor line spell Zatanna described as a ball of string through the labyrinth, if the string were made of my personal guarantee. Blade contributed the destination. Coordinates in no spatial sense, a vial of his own blood, blood of a native son set into the gate's keystone. A door needs an address, Constantine had said. Blood remembers home. His blood's got 30 years of one universe soaked into it. We tuned the door to that. On the last night, Bruce stood at the gate controls running the 9th full diagnostic while Blade checked weapons on a steel table. The old ritual, sword, glaives, stakes, serum, the ritual Bruce had learned to read as Blade thinking. Constantine rates the lock at 85%, Bruce said. Zatanna says 90. Lucius won't give a number, which from Lucius means he's worried. And you? The hardware is sound, the sorcery is beyond my ability to audit, which I dislike. The blood address is untested, which I dislike more. Bruce looked up at the dark ellipse of the gate. If it were a mission in Gotham, I'd postpone. It's not a mission in Gotham. Blade slid the sword home into its sheath. It's my world, brother. Every night we spend perfecting the lock he feeds. The math compounds, I know. And Bruce did know. The math lived in him too now, had always lived in him. The arithmetic of while I stand. He keyed the final sequence. Tomorrow at moonset then, we take the 10% risk. He would think about that. Sentence later. They both would. Chapter 12, the fall moonset. The platform, the whole crew. Lucius at the consoles, Zatanna and Constantine at the frame's flanking sigil stations. The anchor line coiled and lit like a vein of gold light running from the keystone back into the cave's heart. Batman in full armor, the new suit, Fox's masterwork, sun-capable, its cape scalloped in blades, and Blade beside him in his leathers, and between them and the gate, the dark. Speech, Constantine offered. Someone should say something historic. First manned crossing of a controlled interdimensional. Open the door, John, said Batman. Zatanna spoke the key, Nepo, Emo, and the gate did not so much open as remember. The ellipse filled edge to edge with a standing pane of pre-dawn, another universe's sky, and through it, faint, a smell Blade had not smelled in 3 months and had missed like a limb. Diesel, rain on hot asphalt. Home. Address confirmed, Blade said, and something in his chest unclenched. That's my... The jar screamed. That was the after-action report's best language for it. The recovered court power cell, the lead-glass horror Constantine had refused to name, sitting quarantined and supposedly inert in a warded case 30 feet away, screamed, a sound like a nail through the world's eardrum, and lunged its whole malice at the open door like a drowning thing at a light. Constantine shouted a word that scorched the air. Zatanna reversed half a sentence in a single breath. Lucius's consoles went white, and the door's address tore. The pane of pre-dawn shattered into 100 skies. Blade's universe was gone. In its place, the gate strobed through worlds like a slot machine of realities. A burning city, a green sea, a desert under 3 moons, static, static. and the anchor line of gold light snapped taut and began, horribly, to fray. "It's grabbing the far end," Constantine roared over the gale now howling into the gate. "The court cell's got a dead man's charm on the address. We lose the line, the door slams for good and takes a month to rebuild. Shut it down," Zatanna's voice strained to breaking, both hands buried in unraveling light. "Lucius, cut the power. I can't hold the—" "If it shuts with the address torn," Lucius shouted back, fingers flying, "the far coordinates lock at whatever's on the screen, random, and we lose the destination blood. It burns with the breach. We will never find Mr. Blade's universe again." And there it was. The whole decision, complete, in under a second, the way the worst ones always came. Option 1, cut power, safe, door closes. Blade's address, his blood, his home, 30 years soaked into a keystone vial now half consumed by the breach, burns. His universe lost, perhaps forever. His Dracula feeds forever. Option 2, someone carries the anchor through now before the far end tears completely, rides the fraying line into whatever sky the door is strobing through, plants Zatanna's string on the far side, and gives them a fixed point to rebuild from. The line survives. The blood, ADDRESS, survives, seared into the anchor. The door can be retuned, reopened. The mission saved. Whoever goes through arrives wherever the slot machine stops. Batman and Blade looked at each other for the whole of the remaining half-second. Neither of them said anything as banal as together. They were past that. They had been past it since a rock shelf above a black river. Blade simply took the anchor line's living gold in his fist, and Batman locked his gauntlet over Blade's wrist, grip to grip, the soldier's way, and Constantine screamed something that might have been, "Don't," and might have been a blessing, and the Blood Brothers went through the door. Chapter 13. The City Ati, the end of the world, falling. Not through space, through addresses, 100 skies flickering past like a riffled deck. The anchor line burning gold in Blade's fist and Bruce's grip iron on his wrist, and the jar's dying malice clawing at them the whole way down, trying to shake them off into the static between worlds. And then the deck stopped riffling. One sky. Slam. Impact. Real gravity, real ground. A rooftop, tar paper and scavenged sheet metal, buckling under 2 armored bodies out of a wound in the air that snapped shut behind them with a sound like a book closing. The anchor line's far end leapt from Blade's fist and planted, sinking into the rooftop like a golden root, pulsing once, fixed point established, and then dimming to an ember only they could see. Silence. Wind. They came up back to back, weapons out, taking inventory the way both of them had done all their lives. Dawn light. Real sun, Bruce registered, warm on his face, and even now, even here, some part of him marked the miracle of that. A city below them. But wrong. Beautiful and wrong. A dense old European city gone feral. Streets drowned in 15 years of green. Rooftop gardens gone jungle. Windmills of scrap turning on the high towers. Ziplines strung between buildings like the web of some enormous practical spider. No engines. No power lines humming. Somewhere a bell. The air smelled of wood smoke, pine, rot, and underneath the rot, something both of them knew professionally. Infection. Blade, I smell it. Blade turned a slow circle, soared low. His senses read the city the way Bruce's read a crime scene, and what they read made 30 years of instinct stand up and bristle.
It's everywhere. Not vampire. Close cousin, though. Viral. Airborne trace. The whole city's saturated. Every wall, the water, the dust, and...
He paused, head tilting, listening to something below the wind.
There's people. Alive. Dug in. Up high. Hear the heartbeats? Hundreds. They're all above the 4th floor. Nobody sleeps at street level.
Bruce moved to the roof's parapet and looked down into the drowned streets, and the detective read the scene in 4 seconds flat. The barricades on every ground floor window, old and layered and maintained. The UV lamps, he recognized the wavelength signature instantly. Would have recognized it anywhere. It was the wavelength of his own 2 years of hell, strung over doorways and safe house entrances like garlic. The markings on the walls, spray paint pictograms, safe zones, water, and one recurring symbol, a stylized biohazard crossed with a setting sun, beneath the same scrawled warning in 6 languages. Good night. Good luck. They're not hiding from the infected, Bruce said quietly. Not primarily. Look at the architecture of it. UV thresholds. Everything critical is sun-exposed by design. They've organized their entire civilization around one variable. He looked at the eastern light, then at the long shadows the morning was already carving between the towers, and the math assembled itself in him with a cold, familiar click. Daylight is safe, which means the night belongs to something else. Blade, this whole city is on our clock. It's a city of people living the way I lived for 2 years, rationing themselves against the dark. Below and streets away from some deep, unlit gut of the city, a parking structure, a flooded metro mouth, something answered the morning bell. A cry, distant, chorused, not human and not quite animal, the sound of things that had heard the sun arrive and hated it, withdrawing to wait. Blade smiled, slow and cold, and it was the smile Bruce had seen on a Gotham rooftop at their beginning, the smile of a man whose math has just simplified. Wrong universe, Blade said. Right business. Bruce keyed the suit's comm out of habit. Static, nothing, no Oracle protocol, no cave, no Constantine, a whole cosmos of static, and then looked down at the golden ember of the anchor rooted in the tar paper. Their string through the labyrinth. Zatanna's personal guarantee. On the far side of it, 4 of the most capable people in any universe would already be working the problem. The door would reopen. Days, weeks, it would reopen. Until then, a city at the end of the world, holding the line against the dark with sunlight and rope bridges and spray-painted hope. While I stand, said the promise at the root of him, the one the crown itself had knelt to. And Bruce Wayne, Daywalker, Knight, Blood Brother, pulled the cowl into place. We find the survivors, Batman said. We learn the rules of this world, and when the sun goes down, we introduce ourselves, Blade finished, and drew the sword the rest of the way, and the first light of a strange world's morning ran down the edge of it like water. Somewhere below, in the dark under the drowned city, the night was already getting ready for them. It had no idea what was getting ready for it. End of Book 1.